Blake Lively just collapsed in court after another victim took the stand and dropped a bombshell that wrecked her entire defense. She tried to play it off like she had a headache, begging to leave, but the judge wasn't having it, told her to stay put. And when that young girl started spilling the truth, Blake was left utterly shattered, with nowhere to hide. Blake Lively's collapse in court wasn't just a moment of weakness. It was a complete unraveling of everything the public thought they knew about the star. What was supposed to be an ordinary pre-trial session quickly spiraled into chaos when a former employee's explosive testimony was leaked. The courtroom, already tense, buzzed with disbelief as Blake, always composed and poised, showed a side that nobody had ever seen. She had prepared herself for tough questions, for uncomfortable moments. But this was something she never anticipated. As the testimony was revealed, Blake's confidence started to crumble. She was visibly rattled, but the real shock came when she tried to cover it up. "It's just a migraine," she claimed, but the lie was as thin as paper. Her face, pale and flushed with panic, told a completely different story. The once calm actress, known for her elegant appearances and cool demeanor, now looked out of control.
Okay, for now, focus here for a minute. Don't worry, their drama will keep going on. Think a little about yourself too. An Indonesian scientist has uncovered a shocking truth about belly fat, and it has nothing to do with diet or exercise. 95% of people who tried this strange bedtime ritual lost 25 pounds or more. Some even dropped over 50, all while sleeping. No gym, no starving, just one simple step before bed. It sounds crazy, but it's backed by science. Tap the link in the description and see for yourself.
Her eyes darted around the room as if looking for an escape, but there was none. She was trapped, and the court was about to see exactly why. The source of Blake's meltdown was a woman who had worked under her at one of Blake's now defunct business ventures, an eco-friendly brand that had once garnered so much buzz. What had initially seemed like a brilliant progressive initiative quickly became the heart of the courtroom drama. The victim, a former manager of Blake's brand, revealed details that struck like a lightning bolt, exposing the darkness behind the glamorous facade. Blake's eco-brand, celebrated for its sustainable and ethical image, was anything but that. The former employee didn't mince words. She shared how Blake, instead of being a passive observer or a figurehead, had been deeply involved in every single aspect of the company. Blake had been the one to dictate strategy, manage the branding, and oversee the entire operation. The brand, which was supposed to be about sustainability and integrity, was, according to the victim, a money-making machine for Blake, disguised as a social cause. Instead of uplifting the environment, it had been about maintaining Blake's public image and positioning herself as the eco-friendly face of Hollywood. As the victim's testimony unfolded, it was revealed that Blake had been involved in everything. From micromanaging daily operations to making critical business decisions that had ultimately doomed the brand, Blake's hands were all over the mess. What appeared to be a dream venture was revealed to be a public relations stunt gone wrong. The brand, marketed as a visionary eco-project, ended up failing when it became clear that the ethical standards weren't being met. Employees were underpaid, investors were misled, and the true motive behind the project was more about reputation than the environment. The brand's collapse had been sudden, with little explanation at the time. But now, through this testimony, it became clear that Blake's own reckless decisions had directly contributed to its downfall. The woman detailed how the company had been built on promises that weren't kept, promises of ethical business practices, transparency, and environmental impact. In reality, the company was running on fumes, with investors losing trust and employees scrambling for answers. The revelation was shocking, but it didn't stop there. The former employee continued with more details that painted a darker picture of Blake's leadership style. Far from the kind, approachable businesswoman she often portrayed herself as, Blake was described as a micromanager with a volatile temper. The employee spoke of tense interactions, moments where Blake's patience had worn thin, and her sharp words had cut deep. The The most shocking moment came when the victim recalled an incident where Blake allegedly threw a glass of wine at her during an argument. It wasn't just a heated exchange, this was a violent outburst, one that left the employee with physical injuries. The glass shattered upon impact, sending shards of it flying across the room, and the employee was left with a deep cut on her head that required stitches. The victim recounted the pain, the blood, and the complete disregard Blake had shown in that moment. It wasn't a simple accident. It was a deliberate act of aggression. The victim described how Blake had stormed out of the room afterward, leaving her bleeding and confused, her career at the brand now in ruins. The courtroom was still as the victim spoke, her words hanging in the air. The witnesses, the jurors, and even the judge couldn't believe what they were hearing. Blake Lively, the darling of Hollywood, had allegedly committed an act of violence in the name of protecting her brand. This wasn't just a case about a failed business. This was about much more: trust, power, and control. The brand was gone, but the personal fallout was just beginning. The implications of the testimony were staggering. Blake's actions, if true, went beyond a simple outburst. Throwing a glass in a professional setting was bad enough. But when the injury it caused was this severe, it was hard to ignore the possibility that something darker was at play. Was this just a breakdown of a woman under pressure? Or was there a more calculated side to Blake Lively, a side that was willing to go to extreme lengths to maintain control? The testimony opened the floodgates, and now the courtroom, and the public, were being forced to reckon with the truth. In the days that followed, the media exploded with coverage of the incident. Blake Lively, once the epitome of grace and elegance, was now the subject of a scandal that threatened to ruin her career. Her publicist quickly went to work, trying to downplay the damage, but the stories had already spread like wildfire. Social media exploded with hashtags, memes, and debates about whether Blake's actions were justified or whether they were indicative of a much larger pattern of manipulation. As Blake sat in the courtroom, listening to the victim's testimony, it was clear that the trial wasn't just about business missteps or a failed brand. It was about Blake Lively herself, her character, her motivations, and her ability to keep her carefully curated image intact. What was once an admired Hollywood starlet was now a subject of public scrutiny, and the courtroom drama was just beginning. Blake Lively's public image has been under constant pressure ever since the first bombshell testimony was revealed. But now, things have escalated to a much darker level. The physical altercation that took place in the closed confines of Blake's brand's headquarters, a moment that seemed like a sudden outburst, has now been reclassified as something far more serious: attempted murder. The victim, who sustained a deep head wound when a glass of wine was thrown at her, required stitches, and the severity of the injury has raised uncomfortable questions about Blake Lively's temper. What was once a minor workplace incident has now become the center of a legal storm. Legal experts are quick to weigh in on the incident, and their analysis indicates just how much the case has shifted. What seemed like a heated argument has now taken a darker turn. The injury caused by the thrown wine glass isn't just about a cut, it's about intent, about a potential deliberate act of violence. Experts argue that the incident goes beyond a simple altercation. This could be classified as attempted murder. If Blake had intended to hurt her employee, the physical injury, though not fatal, was serious enough to warrant such charges. In any other situation, a moment of this magnitude could have led to far worse consequences, and now the legal ramifications are very real. As the case gains more attention, public perception has become deeply divided. Some see Blake's behavior as a reflection of a pattern of emotionally charged and erratic actions. There's a growing sentiment that this was just another in a series of emotional outbursts that Blake Lively has been hiding behind her calm public persona for years. The throwing of the glass, which was so violent that it led to a serious injury, seems to confirm suspicions of deeper issues beneath her carefully curated image. On the other hand, there are those who argue that the charges are being blown out of proportion. Was this truly an attempt on the victim's life, or was it just a bad moment in a high-pressure environment? The courtroom and public opinion are split. The legal consequences of this alleged act have the potential to completely reshape Blake's career. If convicted of attempted murder, The charges could completely redefine the case and, in turn, her public standing. Experts speculate that this could lead to a high-profile lawsuit with multi-million-dollar implications. Lively's reputation, already in tatters from the explosive testimonies about her business manipulations, could suffer irreparable damage if the public believes that she is capable of such violence. She's been a darling of the Hollywood scene, but if the attempted murder charges stick, she might find herself completely blacklisted, not just from the industry, but from the very public who adored her. The stakes are higher than ever. As the legal proceedings heat up, so does the media frenzy. The public's curiosity has reached new heights, and now they're watching with bated breath as the narrative surrounding Blake Lively shifts. With each new development in the case, the media's scrutiny of her past actions intensifies. They begin digging deeper into her career and personal life, trying to uncover any hidden motives or incidents that could shed light on her behavior. The public now questions whether this outburst was an isolated incident or part of a much larger and more dangerous pattern. They wonder, what drove Blake to this point? Could this be the unraveling of her Hollywood empire? With the victim's testimony now officially part of the court record, the legal experts are dissecting every detail, trying to predict how the charges will unfold. Blake Lively faces serious charges: assault, battery, and possibly attempted manslaughter. Legal analysts are split on what will stick, but all agree that the case is a turning point for both Lively and the Hollywood elite. It's not just about one violent outburst. This case could set significant precedents for how celebrity behavior is judged in the future. Could it change the way that business dealings are done in Hollywood? Could it mean that more stars are held accountable for their actions, no matter how far removed they are from the public eye? Blake's defense team has a tough job ahead of them. They need to discredit the victim's testimony and offer a plausible explanation for Lively's actions. The most likely defense is that the incident was a mistake, a fluke born out of the stress of managing a business and the emotional toll it had taken on her. Maybe Blake's actions were out of character. Maybe the wine was thrown out of frustration, and it wasn't intended to cause harm. That's the narrative they'll try to sell. But with the seriousness of the injury and the high-profile nature of the case, will it be enough? The odds are stacked against her, and her legal team knows that they have to do more than just deflect blame. They need to prove it was an accident, that it wasn't a deliberate act of violence. Meanwhile, public sentiment is shifting. As more information about Blake's manipulative business practices comes to light, the public has begun to rally behind the victim. The story of a beloved Hollywood figure turned villain has captured the public's attention, and many feel that the victim is the one who deserves support. The tides are turning fast, and Blake Lively's carefully cultivated image is crumbling. Could this be the end of her Hollywood career? The narrative is no longer about an unfortunate incident. It's about a deeper flaw in Lively's character, one that the public can no longer ignore. Blake's lawyers, however, are expected to fight back hard. They'll challenge the victim's credibility, questioning inconsistencies in her testimony, and suggesting that the incident may have been blown out of proportion. They'll argue that the victim may have had ulterior motives to fabricate her version of events. It's a familiar tactic in high-profile cases, and Blake's team will likely do everything they can to paint the victim as unreliable. But the truth is, as more people speak out about Blake's leadership style and explosive temper, the harder it will be to convince the public that this was a one-off incident. The judge, however, has made it clear that the implications of this case are huge. Not just for Blake, but for the future of how celebrity behavior is treated in courtrooms across the country. If this case goes the way many legal analysts predict, it could set a precedent that changes the way celebrities are held accountable for their personal actions. Could this be the beginning of a new era in celebrity justice, where the public doesn't look the other way anymore? Will Hollywood start taking responsibility for its actions, or is this just a rare occurrence in an otherwise protected world? Only time will tell, but the eyes of the entertainment industry and the public are now firmly fixed on the outcome. As the courtroom drama surrounding Blake Lively unfolds, it's not just the legal proceedings that are grabbing headlines. Social media is ablaze with opinions, memes, and heated debates. Blake Lively fail quickly trends for hours as people take sides, dissecting her actions in real time. The public is divided, some calling her out for what seems like a pattern of emotional volatility, while others defend her, claiming that this is all just a smear campaign. The online chatter is relentless, with every new development from the trial fueling the fire. It's clear that Blake's actions have sparked something much bigger than a courtroom battle. This is now a battle for her reputation. Behind the scenes, industry insiders are beginning to talk. Major production companies and Hollywood partners, who once considered Blake Lively an invaluable asset, are now rethinking their future collaborations with her. No one is willing to touch a liability, and as more details emerge about her explosive temper and questionable business practices, studios are starting to distance themselves. The fear is palpable in the industry. Blake was once a golden girl of Hollywood, known for her roles in major productions and her charismatic public persona. But now, with her reputation crumbling, Hollywood's movers and shakers are beginning to wonder if it's time to cut ties before her baggage drags them down too. Former colleagues from the fashion industry, where Blake had also established a prominent presence, are now speaking out. They describe her as a perfectionist, someone who demanded the best from everyone around her. But this reputation for being a meticulous and driven professional no longer seems like such a positive trait. According to those who worked with her, Blake was known for her sharp edge and intense demands, but nothing about her personality suggested that she would lash out with such violence. Yet, the testimony paints a different picture, one of a woman who was willing to cross boundaries in order to maintain control, no matter the cost. It's a side of Blake Lively that no one in Hollywood ever saw coming, and it's causing many to reconsider their perception of the once idolized star. Calls for a full-scale investigation into Blake Lively's business dealings are starting to gain momentum. This isn't just about her outburst in the courtroom anymore. This is about everything she's built in the public eye. Could the collapse of her eco brand, which once promised to be her big legacy, actually be the tip of the iceberg? Critics are now questioning her entire business empire. From her fashion ventures to her various partnerships, people are starting to wonder if everything Blake touched was tainted with manipulation and greed. What seemed like harmless PR moves and business ventures is now coming under intense scrutiny. Was it all a carefully crafted illusion, a way for Blake to secure her own status at the expense of others? The investigation into her business practices could lead to even more explosive revelations. If this pattern of behavior continues, it could spell the end of her empire. The victim's testimony has opened a floodgate of accusations that Blake may have acted in similar ways with others in her professional life. It's clear that this wasn't an isolated incident. The more people speak out, the more it seems that Blake Lively's explosive temper and ruthless business decisions are not just a one-off, but part of a troubling pattern. From business partners to employees, the stories are starting to stack up, and the question on everyone's mind is, could this finally be the thing that catches up with her? Could the woman who once seemed so untouchable now be facing the consequences of her actions, not just in the courtroom, but in the public's eye? Blake Lively's collapse in the courtroom wasn't just a legal defeat, it's a deeply personal crisis for the actress. For years, she has cultivated an image of grace, elegance, and strength. She was the golden girl of Hollywood, admired by fans and colleagues alike for her charm and apparent perfection. But now, that image is shattered. The very public nature of the trial, combined with the bombshell testimonies, has left Blake vulnerable, and it's clear that the weight of the allegations is taking its toll on her mental and emotional well-being. Psychological experts who have followed the case suggest that Blake's breakdown in the courtroom might just be the tip of the iceberg. The public might only be seeing a small piece of what's truly going on behind closed doors. The pressure of the trial, combined with the mounting accusations, seems to be pushing her to a breaking point. Experts believe that this collapse could be a sign of deeper emotional distress, and that the facade of control and composure that Blake worked so hard to maintain is starting to crack. Could it be that this isn't just a one-off incident? Could this entire legal battle be a reflection of a much larger crisis in Blake's life? Friends and family close to Blake have reported that she is withdrawing, isolating herself in the wake of everything that has happened. This is no longer just about a business failure or a bad court case. It's about her very identity. Behind the scenes, Blake is struggling to cope with the fallout. The public's perception of her has shifted dramatically, and she's finding it difficult to deal with the constant barrage of media attention. The same people who once adored her now look at her with suspicion and disappointment. As a result, Blake has become more reclusive, retreating from the spotlight in an attempt to regroup and deal with the emotional fallout. Despite her outward appearance of strength, those closest to Blake say that the ongoing trial is taking a visible toll on her, physically and mentally. She no longer carries herself with the same poise and grace she once did. Her usual confidence is gone, replaced by a constant aura of stress. The demands of the trial, the mounting negative press, and the uncertainty about her future have made her visibly exhausted. There are reports that she's losing sleep, neglecting her health, and grappling with a sense of dread about what's to come. Blake Lively, once seen as a symbol of Hollywood success, is now a shadow of her former self. Her publicists, frantic to control the narrative, are fighting an uphill battle. The more they try to downplay the situation, the worse it seems to get. Every new testimony, every new leak, only adds fuel to the fire. Blake's carefully crafted image is slipping further and further away with each passing day. The public can see the cracks in her armor, and it's hard to believe she can ever go back to the way things were. The narrative has shifted from one of admiration to one of doubt, and no amount of PR spin seems to be enough to salvage what's left of her reputation. In the end, Blake Lively's battle in the courtroom is more than just a fight for her career. It's a fight for her very identity. She's no longer just a Hollywood starlet. She's a woman on the edge, struggling to cope with the consequences of her actions. The road ahead is uncertain, and no one knows if she will ever be able to rebuild the life and career she once had.